Are you ready to learn the most important skill you will ever need when it comes to sewing? I hope the answer is yes, because in this video, I'm going to help you start sewing straight lines. Straight lines are the foundation of absolutely any sewing project, from quilting to bags to clothes. So no matter what you're trying to make with your sewing machine, you're going to need this skill. Hi, my name's Abby and I help absolute beginners start making clothes they love. So if that's you, be sure to like and subscribe below because all of my videos are going to help you on that journey. Now, when it comes to sewing straight, what we need to keep in mind are 5 rules, okay? There's gonna be 5 things we keep in mind, and then we're gonna talk about a whole bunch of tools that you can use to help you sew those nice straight lines, okay? And the last part of this video, I'm actually going to share a really important tip, so be sure to stick around because that one is going to be a game changer. Now, the 5 tips that I can give you for sewing straight lines. Tip number 1. Do not look at the needle, okay? I know it's moving and our eyes are kind of naturally drawn to it. Don't do this. It's going to give you a headache and it's not going to help you at all when it comes to sewing straight lines. Tip number 2, don't fight the feed dogs. Okay, if you've never heard this word, don't worry, most people don't talk about it. But your sewing machine, no matter which one you have, has these things called feed dogs. And if you look under the presser foot, you'll see these textured pieces of metal. When the needle moves, these move as well. And what they're doing is they are actually coming up out of the needle plate, moving back, then going down under the needle plate. So what they're doing is pulling the fabric through the machine at the correct speed. Okay, that means that you are not going to push or pull your fabric. The machine is going to do that for you. So don't be tugging and pulling. Let the machine do its job, okay? That is going to help you make nice, smooth, straight lines. Support your fabric, okay? We do not want to have our fabric hanging off of the table like this. This is going to put the fabric under tension. It's going to be pulling away from you and it makes it harder to control. Instead, if you have a large piece of fabric, take the excess and lay it on your table. Then use your hand to stabilize the fabric that's going through the machine. This way you have more control and you can really get the fabric to go where you want. Okay? Don't let it hang off the table. No. Take your time and go slow. If you have an electronic sewing machine like this one with this little with this speed control, turn this all the way down. Okay, the slower we can go, the better control we have, especially as beginners, okay? And when I say go slow, I also mean take your time and practice. The more you work at this, the easier it's going to get. So don't get frustrated if the first 2 or 3 lines you do aren't great. Take a breath, slow down, and spend some time to practice this. Which brings us to tip number 5, practice, okay? Do this a couple of times. You might not get it right the first, but the 5th, 10th time you put a piece of fabric through the machine, it's going to get better. And if you want even more help with practicing, I actually have some printables. They are pages you can print off and use to practice sewing those really nice straight lines. So if that would help you, you can grab them down below in the description. So while keeping those 5 rules in mind, let's talk about the actual tools that we're going to use to sew these nice straight lines. And there are a bunch of them. I think it's 8 or something, but I'm going to tell you right now from the very beginning, the first 2 are the primary ones that most people use. So try to practice with those. See if they work for you because they're going to be the easiest. Everything else is definitely still an option, but it's going to create a little bit more work for you and set up on your machine to use them. Okay? So the most common thing we're going to use is either going to be your presser foot or your needle plate. Okay? Now, most presser feet, if you're using the universal one, it should look something like this, is going to be from the center where the needle is sewing to the edge is usually going to be around that 1 centimeter or 1/2 inch, which is the most common seam allowance that we actually use in sewing, which means that we can actually use the side of our presser foot as a guide. So when we're sewing, what we'll do is look at the edge of our presser foot and make sure the fabric is lined up with that while we're sewing. That is where our eyes are going to be looking. Again, not the needle. Instead, you'll be looking at the edge of the presser foot and making sure the edge of your fabric is lined up with it. Okay? Now, other things about your presser foot, there might also be little markings on it. You can see here on my presser foot, I have these little notches. You can also use these. Look at these and make sure that your fabric is lining up with them while you're sewing. Okay? So that's the presser foot. The other place we can look is the needle plate, and you'll see all these lines to the right of your needle. They are literally drawn right there for this purpose, okay? These are the most common things that we use besides the presser foot. And what we will do is line the edge of our fabric up with one of these lines. Now, you might be wondering, which line do you use? And that depends on your project. Your project should tell you a number, either 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 2 inch, 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters, and then you will find which line on your needle plate matches that distance. Okay? So if you have questions about that, let me know down below. I can make a specific video for it. Okay? So again, your presser foot and your needle plate are going to be the easiest things to use because they're always on your machine. Okay? But you might find that it's hard to keep your eye on the lines, or which line was I using? You might get a little bit distracted while you're sewing. So there are other tools we can use if you find this to be a little bit difficult. The first option is to use washi tape or painter's tape. You can take a piece of this, put it right where you want the edge of your fabric to be, and that way you have a nice long guide down the entire length of your sewing machine. So you can put this on your machine, and again, when you're sewing, you just line up the edge of your fabric with this. I don't love tape because it can leave a sticky residue on your machine. So another option very similar to this one is to use a big rubber band. You can put it around your machine, and this one's really easy to move. Move it wherever you need it. And again, with all these options, I'm going to stop repeating this, with all of these options, whatever we put on the machine, you're going to line the edge of your fabric up with it and keep it lined up the entire time you're sewing. Okay? So the rubber band, the same option. Another one that a lot of people like is a magnetic seam guide. So you can just keep one of these near your machine, and it's the same idea. It has a little magnet on the back. You put it where you want it, and then use that to line up the edge of your fabric. Some sewing machines actually come with attachments to help you with this. Mine came with this funny little metal rod, and if I turn my machine to the side, you can see there's actually a hole behind my presser foot. So if I poke this into that hole, you'll see now that I have this arm that comes down, and I can slide this whatever distance I need and line up my fabric with this while I'm sewing. So check your machine, check your accessories, and see if you have any guide attachments. Yours might look a little bit different than mine, but again, check your manual. It will tell you how to use these. If you don't like any of these options and your machine didn't come with any special attachments, you can buy special presser feet to use if you're struggling with sewing straight. So one option is a foot that looks like this. And you can see here underneath, it has this kind of white blade along the bottom. And if I turn this screw, I can move that blade side to side. So I can adjust where I'm going to put the fabric and line it up while I'm sewing. So there are a lot of different variations of these out there. You can look them up and find one that you think will work for you. And if you can't get any of these to work quite right, or what's more common is that where you need to sew isn't quite lined up with any of the lines or any of your gauges or any of your guides, you can always move the position of the needle itself. Check your manual for how to do this, but most commonly you're either going to pick a specific stitch on your machine. It'll look something like this. So if I pick this stitch, it's going to put my needle in the center. And if I pick this stitch, it's going to put my needle to the right. Okay, so it's really common that you just pick a certain stitch on your machine. Another option, if you have a slightly fancier machine, you might have a separate knob that you can actually turn to move the position of the needle. Or if you have an LED screen, you might have a menu somewhere where you can actually tell the machine where you want the needle to be. Okay, so this will look different from machine to machine, so make sure that, again, you use your manual. I don't know if anyone has told you this before, but if they haven't, I actually have 2 tips for you now. If you have a question about your sewing machine, check your manual, okay? It is going to be the first place you should look for answers, because it's going to be the fastest place because it was written for your machine, okay? So don't jump on Google and say, how to move the needle. You're going to come up with a million different videos with a million different machines that aren't yours. Instead, save yourself the time and read your manual, okay? And my second tip, and this one is really, really important, especially for beginners. When we first start sewing, we want in our heads, I think, to think that a line needs to be perfectly straight. It needs to be like a ruler. That's not the case at all, okay? I've been sewing for 15 plus years and my lines are not ruler straight. What we're really worried about when it comes to sewing straight lines is that our lines are smooth, okay? So if our lines are kind of a little bit wobbly, but they're smooth, we're not gonna have any problems. Where we're gonna run into problems is if our lines are jagged. So if we have really intense movements like this or something, that's where we're going to be able to see that and actually have problems with our projects. So when you are practicing and trying to sew your straight lines, remember, these do not have to be ruler straight. That's not the idea. They just need to be smooth and pretty straight. Now again, if you're worried about this or you're not sure, I have some sewing printables that have these nice thick lines. And if you can sew and keep your line inside of the lines on the printable, you are doing a great job and you're gonna have no problems with your sewing or any of your projects. Okay, so if you would like those printables, if those would help you to make sure that you're sewing straight enough, you can get them down below. They're totally free. And yeah, that is how we sew straight. We just need to keep in mind that we don't look at the needle, go slow, and practice. You can use any of the attachments we talked about in this video. If one of them stood out to you and you still had questions about it, let me know below. We can chat in the comments. Otherwise, good luck with practicing your straight lines. I hope this video helped you. And if you need any other tips or tricks, here are some of my other beginner-friendly videos to help you start making clothes you love. Happy sewing!